So welcome everyone to today's lunch panels. I hope you've all had an incredible morning. I hope that you agree with me that today has been fun, informative, and hopefully most important, connected. My name is Rachel Sissel. I'm an Associate Vice President for Early Childhood at Nebraska Children and Family Foundation with the Communities for Kids team. I am very, very excited and proud to be on stage with these 5 leaders. Today we are going to talk about their journey as their organizations and communities address early care and education challenges in their communities. So, first we have JoAnn Gieselman. She is the Director of Growing Community Connections, a collaborative leadership and support organization improving the quality lives for children, youth, and families in the Siouxland region, covering Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. Keisha Thomas is the Vice President of Human Resources, Employee, and Community Relations at North End Teleservices, an omni-channel provider of contact center solutions, including telephone, email, and text for federal, state, and local entities and commercial businesses. Melinda Long is the director of the Columbus Community Hospital Childcare Center, where she has played a leadership role since the center was built. As the director, she has seen the center play a crucial role in the community's ability to maintain quality health care. Mary Pierce and my best friend, Ken Snyder, are members of the Keith County Area Foundation Fund. Mary is also a leader at Mid-Plains Community College, where she champions students pursuing careers in childcare and early education. Ken is a dynamic community leader playing an active role in community vitality across Ogallala. So let's get started. So JoAnn, Growing Community Connections hasn't just united one community around the importance of early childhood. You have brought 3 states together with a focus on holistic early childhood, family, and community support. Can you please take a few moments to share Growing Community Connections' story, purpose, and mission?
Absolutely. So at the core of Growing Community Connections is this need or this want to connect community all together, and then using those connections to support children and families. That was really what we set out with. It was our mission, our vision as we went forward. What we found was that our boundaries are very close together with Iowa and South Dakota, like 5 minutes apart, and so parent challenges or opportunities don't stop at boundaries on the state line. So they were able to just blend together so beautifully with that. And part of that was just the beautiful spirit in our community that works together in collaboration. When we started out, there were about 6 people around the table, and we grew to about 860 some people, which has been absolutely amazing as we look at that. And there are a number of reasons when you look at that had happened. One is, and I always say it's a God thing, because every month we add 9 to 12 people, and it's not that we're out marketing, it's just that people understand that collaborating together and doing things together makes a world of difference compared to trying to do it on your own. But in that same thing, as we collaborate together, we just really begin to build community and make things happen. So a quick story on how that all happened. I used to be an early childhood coordinator. And so in that, we had this meeting upstairs at our Siouxland Family Center where there were leaders meeting around a grant. They were collaborating in the community and doing things. And unfortunately, when the grant dollars ran out, then they kind of had to rip off the Band-Aid. We had to stop what we were doing, and we had to move forward with that. So then we had to dissolve that collaboration, and about 2 years later, we started another one in the community, because it is a collaborative community, and it was Cardinal Connections. And they were doing a whole bunch of things with the schools and the community, and we were hiring people, and that was also a wonderful piece of all of that. But then again, we began to realize that the grant was running out, and we didn't get another one. And that one even hurt more, because there were positions we had to take away and things that had to stop. And so right at the end of that, Nebraska Children and Families came to us and said, we see that you're really a collaborative community, And what we'd like to do is teach you a little bit about collective impact and also about sustainability. And we'd like to offer you a grant to start with early childhood and support that in your community. And we took that, and it was so exciting to find, because when we went away and came back after learning those things, what we really learned was the importance of collective impact as a structure for what you do, that you all have a vision and mission that you're all working for, that you all have the opportunity to communicate together, that you all have that data that's driving you forward, and that you're doing activities and events and sharing resources together. So that, and looking at things through a sustainable lens. So we had enough experience with what happens when grants run out and you didn't look at it as a sustainable lens. So I'm going to share one story, if I can, real quickly.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. So early on, when we started our early childhood in our area, we did the pyramid, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. But the pyramid really builds that kind of piece in your classrooms that helps the teachers learn better ways to connect with the kids, sets up your classroom in great ways. But even with all of that, there's the top of the pyramid. Some of the kids reach the top. And one of the things we wanted to do was implement parent-child interactive therapy in our classrooms. And we had some great therapists that were working on the pyramid with our families. And they were willing to go to Oklahoma to get trained as PCIT therapists. And while they were gone, we built PCIT rooms in our building and in the schools, so that when they came back, those were already built. The toys were in the room for the therapists to use with the families, and the buildings were already allowing them to use the rooms for free. And DHHS then was so kind to start picking up some of the billing for mental health, which this included. So then it became sustainable and preventable, that we were doing something to prevent things down the road, early ages, and also keep it going. It continues in our community till today.
Thank you. That was a fantastic answer, and it really painted the picture of growing community connections. So you talked about a lot of different things. You talked about moving through 3 states. You talked about the natural collaboration that happens in your communities. Talked about some of the challenges, which one of them was losing that grant funding. And then you also talked about the vision of, the PCIT classrooms.
Right.
So one of the questions that I have is about that engagement. So I'm curious, as you move through this whole comprehensive collaborative, how did you maintain that broad engagement with various partners?
There's 2 answers to that, if I can do that. So one is strategically. We really understood the value of those kind of relationships that are strong in your community, listening to people, understanding, building relationships, going to their meetings, coming to our meetings. So an example, just real quickly, of that is I was part of a Leadership Dakota County team that was actually trying to put flag in our rural areas. And when they were doing that, they started hearing about families in that area that were actually going to the gas station to get their food, because there was no grocery store in that town. So when you're looking at that, we were able to then build in that the families could order together, and we could put that order into Hy-Vee. Hy-Vee was willing to do 1 delivery to this rural community, and it went to the church, and then the church was able to let families know that their groceries had arrived. If they could pick them up, they would. If they were elderly, they would deliver them to them. Because when we're looking at strategic planning, we need so many diverse voices and so much different perspectives in our community. So when you're looking at our rural and urban engagement, so I'm going to kind of touch on that a little bit, our rural engagement really is kind of a geographical isolation. So it's hard for them to get to healthcare, it's hard for them to find childcare, and it's really hard for them also to just have that transportation in the community to get things around. And of course, those things intertwine all the time. Whereas our urban areas, they have services, but they are overloaded. You have a wait list to get into those services. And they're fragmented, because you can go here and get this much, and you can go here and get that much. So working together as partners, we've been able to overcome many of those challenges because we listen, because we're involved with each and every community that we serve.
So I think you touched on the second question I'm supposed to ask you, which is, why are strategic partnerships so essential? But what I'm really interested in is, what are your most unusual partnerships? Like, where did you find partners that you didn't expect to find partners? This is a curveball. She wasn't anticipating this, you guys.
Actually, as you said that, I'm thinking to myself of all the different partners we have. So we have businesses, churches, schools, law, medical providers, all kinds of partners. And when you say unexpected partners, our recent one is we have had the city come to us and said, we recognize that the Siouxland area is a resource desert. People are not moving here because of 3 reasons. And those 3 reasons are, number 1, childcare, housing, and transportation. And they know that Growing Community Connections really does a lot of work with Early Head Start. So when they said that, we had the opportunity then to bring in partners. So we brought in the University of Iowa, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We brought in the United Way. We brought in, I'm trying to think, ESU. We brought in colleges, on both sides of the river, brought everybody together and said, you know, we need to figure out a child care solution. So the group became Childcare Solutions. But in with that, there was a variety of partners and others that were involved. We had C4K that was involved. Nebraska Children and Families was involved. It was a really great thing. But even in that, one of the things that we saw was that our partners didn't want to be the answer for our providers. So we held what was called gallery walks. And Melissa Polonowski with C4K was so wonderful to come in. We had 2 different nights that we did gallery walks with our providers from all sides of the river. And they came together and we put up signs around the room with scribes at those that said, what are the challenges for early childhood providers? What are the things that we're working for? We really did a really good job of asking those questions, and the scribes were writing down those answers, and Melissa did an absolutely beautiful job of putting that all together in graphs and charts. And at our next GCC meeting, which I would really encourage you to be a part of, is that we're going to be talking about the results of that the gallery walk and what we learned from that, because it's what we need to look at for data that drives us forward when we're talking about collective impact. So I'm excited about that piece of it as well.
Well, great. Well, thank you for taking that question. We are going to move on to Keisha. Keisha, you've been a part of North End Teleservices since it opened in 2015, and now you are a key part of the company's plan to develop a new headquarters facility, which is expected to include on-site childcare. Can you please take a few moments to tell us about North End Teleservices' business case for getting involved in ensuring early childhood access?
Yes. Thank you so much for having all of us up here. So North End, I'll start by telling you a little story of North End. We opened in 2015. I was the first employee. And pre-COVID, in 2015, I think by the end of the year, we had 12 employees by that end of the year. Just before COVID, we had 47 employees in March of 2020. By the end of 2020, when COVID hit, we had a little over 200 employees. Currently, we are, by the end of this year, we'll be right around around 700 employees. So in that, as very rapidly growing, right? So in that, what we're realizing is that how important childcare is to our employees. So we bring the work, and we were located on 24th and Hamilton, which is a really urban area. That way, that community had sustainable employment, which was one of our goals, is making sure that our community had sustainable employment and then uplifting the entire economy of that community. Collective impact that we want to talk about that. What we've had is over the course of time since North End has been open, we've right around contributed about $400 million to the local economy, which is pretty remarkable feat. But then again, even saying that, the most important thing for our employees is childcare. We're about 80% female, and most of our employees are single moms with small children. Some of them are school age, some of them are not. So having affordable and accessible childcare is really important, which is why by the end of 2026, we will have about an $80 million development completed. As we talked about, that we'll have childcare center on site. That still isn't going to relieve the capacity issue, because if you have 700 employees, the childcare site might be able to take maybe 100 kids. So we'll see what happens with that. But I do want to say this. I did a brief survey with all of our employees and asked them, if they had the opportunity to have their health insurance 100% paid for, or childcare, $1,000 a month contributing to their childcare, what do you think everyone said? Childcare. They would much rather have the money for childcare. That really informed our decision to be a mission forward and an employer that really took and listened to what their employees were saying. They are the most important thing in our business, and without them, how do we survive?
So I'm glad that you said that, because that's one of the things that's sort of resonating with me is that North End recognizes the importance of taking care of their staff, because that relates to the productivity of their business.
Correct.
So how would you suggest, or what piece of advice would you give to communities? I hate to say the word convince, but how can they convince other businesses or organizations to get involved in helping build out capacity and access to early childhood care?
Well, I think that sentiment has been echoed throughout this morning. It's a collective thing. Businesses and community leaders need to really advocate for their community and for the constituency in the community. At the same time, businesses, in order to promote retention and loyalty and things like that, businesses need to understand that the impact that they could have by providing some sort of, whether it's a subsidy, childcare on site, or even flexible hours, being understanding in that our employees, you don't just check it out the door, right? There's this old adage that you believe that employers would believe that if something is going on with an employee at home, then they can just check that out at the door and then go on into work. That doesn't work that way. Life tends to follow us into work, right? How many of you have seen or know someone that either has called in to work because they don't have child care? The child care center is closed. Believe it or not, it's going to be snowing here soon, so we already know that's going to happen. Yeah. And there's going to be instances where people do not have child care. So we have to build the capacity, and whether that's getting everybody in the room and having a conversation like we're having today, it has to happen. So
I hope you guys are holding up those signs. I literally give that one a heart for me. Thank you. Okay, so you also touched on this. Not every business is in the position to put in on-site childcare. You talked about maybe flexible shifts, but did you guys at North End discuss other approaches, and what else are you implementing?
So we have a lot of different shifts. We even have a split shift, and our split shift is the employee comes in at like 6 o'clock in the morning, they get off at like noon, and then they don't come back until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you have that space in between. Maybe someone doesn't need childcare all day. Maybe it's just in the morning, or maybe it's just in the evening. But employers need to really be innovative in the way they're thinking about hours. Working from home is a great source, right? But you have to be really understanding. And COVID showed us that could be done. And I know now we're asking a lot of the employees to come back into office, but that doesn't work for everyone. And unfortunately, the vast majority of working parents, that doesn't work. So aside from a stipend, flexible hours, I think it's a culture of family support. If we have someone that needs to leave for a half an hour at 3 o'clock to go pick their kid up, let them leave for a half an hour at 3 o'clock to go pick their kid up. I mean, that way you build it's retention, it's loyalty, it's culture, it's support, and you're building that trust with your employees that you're going to take what they need seriously.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So happy anniversary to the Columbus Community Hospital Child Care Center. Like the conference, you guys recently celebrated your 7th anniversary. Can you please take a few minutes to tell us more about operating a child care center within a community hospital?
Absolutely. So I started January of August 2017. We built a child care center. It's a freestanding building by the hospital. We have the capacity of 155 kids. We have about 135 on a roster and probably 100 a day. So with the hospital, they brought me on. I had to do all the policies, procedures. I even got to pick out the colors to everything. So it was really neat to be part of it all. But with the hospital, it's nice because we have access to like HR, marketing, information systems, maintenance, purchasing. Like I always say, I feel like we're spoiled brats because when we talk about these things, we are so lucky because we still have to work for things, but we also have the hospital to back us up. So they built this hospital to help the employees have childcare, which was great. And at first, it was hard because everybody needed to decide if they were going to change to our childcare center or stay where they were. And so that was kind of tough. So at first we took, all the employee kids, then we took the medical providers' children, and then we did take some public families. And then within, months to a year, we had no more openings. So we started to weed out, once your public family left, then, we just only took the hospital employees. But it's a little different with the hospital because the hospital has their own set of rules and regulations, and then the Child Care Center has our rules and regulations. So you have to follow DHHS and, health and sanitation and the fire marshal stuff, but yet the hospital has their own set of rules and regulations and what you have to cover, and sometimes it's more than like what a child care center has to, so it's hard to like do both. It's just more work. So if I hire somebody, it's not just, I'm going to hire you and then you can get your fingerprints and we can start. I mean, it's a good month and a half process because they have to go through the hospital orientations and then my orientations. And I always tell them in my interviews, like, if you want this, you have to want it because it is a lot of work. You have to go through physical. You have to, it's hospital and it's childcare. So, and I think we're lucky because we get good employees because we pay benefits. I have 24 employees a day on site. I have 40 altogether. They work full time, they get benefits, we pay pretty well. They're there because they want to be there, which is why I think we have such a good success with the children that leave, because they're being taught because those providers want to be there.
Great, thank you, Melinda, for that. So what I'm curious about is in the past 7 years, you had talked about changing enrollment, you talked about the two governing bodies that are kind of, adhering to different sets of rules because of where you're placed, but how else, or what other changes have you seen within the Child Care Center that are adapting and moving to meet the needs of your community?
So with that, I thought just changing needs would be like we gave other child cares in town the openings. So, so we took from their child cares, but now they were able to take other kids. And then when COVID happened, that was kind of cool too, because we changed to 24 hours in case we needed to be. We were open at, for whatever was needed for the doctors, nurses. There wasn't, a lot of child cares closed. We weren't able to close. We took, if the doctors had to come in early, then we had to accommodate and come in early. If, we needed whatever they needed to be able to assist during COVID, then we had to take care of. We just gave, the parents options too. Like, if you guys feel more safe staying with your kids at home, then we can do that, and we ate that cost. But then if that's where they felt more comfortable with their kids at that point, then that's what we went with. And we were able to do that because of the hospital backing us. You know, to operate a childcare is very, very costly, and we lose a fair amount of money every year. But for me, all I have to do is cover my wages, and the hospital is generous enough to cover the rest. So, you know, and our CEO says by retaining one nurse, it pays for my loss every year.
Wow.
It's a great way to look at it. So as you've kind of already talked about, the hospital, it sounds like it's a crucial leader in your community. How has Columbus Community Hospital Child Care Center forged positive relationships with home and center-based providers in Columbus?
Yeah, so when we first opened, we got a lot of pushback. So home providers were angry because we took their kids. Child cares were angry centers because we took their employees. And it wasn't even that, it was just they chose the opportunity, and if it fit what my vision was, then I gave them the opportunity to come to the center, and you know, they chose that. But fast forward to now, we are in collaboration with all the centers and in-homes. If somebody calls me with a non-hospital child, then I automatically give out those people. And I'll have in-homes call me that say, hey, I have an opening. If you get a phone call, let me know, you know, and I will. I'll just send them to them or other centers, or, you know, there's trainings that we need. So then we just housed a whole body training at the hospital for providers in Columbus. We work with them, you know, if we need CPR first aid, is there anybody else in, you know, town that needs that? And then we collaborate that way. You know, we've had them where there's been behavioral issues, and they'll reach out and say, hey, what have you done? Or vice versa. You know, during COVID, that was huge. Like, are you guys still wearing masks? What are you telling parents? How are you dealing with this? Like, I feel like we just have a good rapport with everybody in town to just kind of discuss those things.
Great, thank you for sharing that. We were actually just talking in one of the last sessions about how important it is in communities to support their current early childhood professionals. So there's a focus on expansion of capacity, but also supporting the current capacity, because that's truly the system. So thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm gonna move on to Mary and Ken. Ken, it's your time. You got this.
It's Mary. It's Mary.
Ken and I have known each other for a long time as Mary, and I have. So over the past several years, Keith County, home to communities including Ogallala, Brule, and Paxton, they've launched, you guys have launched a community visioning planning series, which revealed widespread desire to prioritize quality early childhood development. So my first question for you guys are, what are some of the specific tactics that you guys in Keith County have used to address the challenges of quality and capacity? And what are those challenges?
Well, I have the notes, so I will start. Quality childcare and early childhood development, it's been an issue in Keith County, just as across the state, for years. In 2018, we became a C4K community, but in 2019, the Keith County Foundation Fund received a large anonymous donation, and that's where those visioning sessions came from. The foundation said, we want the community's input into what's important here. So they were really awesome, these sessions. We just invited anyone from the community, leaders, as well as just the general public. And it came up with 3 topics: housing, first impressions, and early childhood. So the early childhood focus has since grew from there. We've pulled together a whole bunch of entities that now focus on this. We've expanded the C4K presence because we were able to hire a coordinator. Not just any coordinator. I will say Laura Kemp is our coordinator, and frankly, she has done an amazing job. What Laura's personality has allowed us to do is bridge that gap with the childcare providers. Frankly, when you talk about childcare, the need for quality, those already serving in that capacity in your community get frightened. And it raises their hackles. They're afraid you're going to open up a childcare center, and But what Laura's been able to do is just be really a supportive person for them. She has found funding sources. If they are in need of toys or supplies, Laura has been able to coordinate, and she is a great resource for our community. So with that position in place, we looked at what other ways can we, first of all, how can we inspire people to want to become a child care provider because of, I'm going to say a negative persona like they're babysitters. No. We needed to raise that level of what people, how they refer to their babysitters and become, they are small business owners. They are the most important people in our communities because they are raising our children. So I've got the education hat on here too, and I'm like, hey, we have a class. Let's do Intro to Early Childhood Education. So we opened this up and we said, we will pay for that class. The foundation, C4K, we will pay for that class. Anyone who is interested. Okay, you have to remember, we are a community of 7,000 people, 4,000 in the city of Ogallala. We had 6 people take that class. Now you might say, oh, 6 people took a class. No, 6 people took a class. 6 people took a class, just again, raising the importance of quality and early childhood development. So did that spur someone on to become a child care provider? I don't know. Several of those students are now in education, which leads back to childhood development. One of the greatest things that we are really excited about is just recently the foundation came up with an incentive program to any of our licensed providers who want to participate in Step Up to Quality's program. If you get to step 4, the foundation will pay $5,000. If you get to step 5, the foundation will give you an additional $10,000 for a $15,000 incentive. I'm not going to get into Step Up to Quality because, frankly, I don't know the program. However, 3 of our 14 licensed providers are now participating in that program. Again, you might say 3 providers. 3 providers are stepping up their quality. So those are some of the ways we are reaching out and some of the specific tactics that Keith County is using. The last example I will give is we have created an early childhood development core group. Does it have a formal name? Absolutely not. Who comes to that table? People who are interested. C4K, the foundation, the public schools, economic development, any public and private entity that wants to join. We invite to the table because we know the topic is crucial to our survival. We always talk about workforce development, absolutely workforce development, but this is where I put on my other hat, not educator, not C4K member, not foundation member, but as a grandparent. How do I want my grandchildren to be raised as far as what kind of early childhood development are they able to partake in? So this group is looking at all different ways, and we have huge leaders. We have Pam Abbott, who's with the Nebraska Community Foundation, but we have people who she reaches levels that Mary Pierce cannot reach, I'm sorry, Ken, you can't reach either. So our group is very varied. And, we always look for any kind of group, whether it's hiring for the school. We look at what assets is someone bringing to the table. So Ken's assets are obviously different than mine, but all of our assets add to the overall view of what we're trying to do in Keith County. There you go, Ken.
My turn?
Okay. So Ken always asks us the really hard questions.
Well, I will go right ahead. First, I will say that 700 people look a lot different from up here on the stage than they do from the back of the room. So the first thing I want to comment on is 13 out of our 14 providers taking us up on pursuing the $15,000 bonus. And to me, that was really disappointing. I thought $15,000 of free money, they all ought to jump on that. My wife had to explain it to me. She said, there isn't a harder job in the world than taking care of little kids all day long. And when you get home at night after doing that, you don't want to start studying, watching videos, stepping up your quality. And then I had to have a friend of mine put a finer point on that. He said, these daycare providers are like the people who are sent out to drain the swamp. When you're up to your waist in alligators, you often forget that your job is to drain the swamp. So, all right, I apologize for being disappointed that not all of them took us up on that. And now I'm going to violate the instructions that Linda Smith gave us this morning.
Oh, okay. Oh, are you going to whine?
Yeah.
No whining.
Okay, so Linda said, quit telling us about how poorly paid these poor providers are. I'm sorry, Linda, but I was in the coffee shop a year ago, and here is a young woman who had been the Head Start coordinator in Ogallala, and she's working in the coffee shop. And I said, all right, tell me how come you're here? And she says, well, I might be getting paid under the counter here, and might not have to declare this on my income tax, and I can't take any more pay because if I take more pay, it will reduce my welfare benefits. So here we have somebody who was a big player in childcare, and she's worried about her welfare benefits being reduced. So we all know that childcare can only move forward if we figure out a way to subsidize childcare. And I think about that, and I think about what's possible and what's impossible. And a year ago, I would have told you that federally funded pre-K was an impossible goal. And we missed it by one vote in Congress. So perhaps I will say it is possible, but probably not this year. I would also like to say that state-funded pre-K, a year ago or a few years ago, I would have said that is an impossibility. I don't know what the probability is that it will happen in Nebraska, but Oklahoma did it. Oklahoma is as conservative a state as you can get, and actually the legislation wasn't passed in the most forthright manner. You can read about that on your iPhone, but it was snuck into a funding bill that nobody except the writer of the bill bothered to read. But they created a very good program in Oklahoma, and their results have been tremendous. Kids come into preschool or come into kindergarten ready for school. Surprisingly, by the third grade level, the differences by the kids that went to preschool and didn't kind of even out. But then when they get in high school, the differences become more apparent, and at the college level, even more apparent. And the Oklahoma program has been copied in a number of states, and I can't tell you how many, but so that's,
So one of the things that I was talking about was you always ask the best questions, and you do. These are the things, thank you for pointing out just this very complex issue that you guys are considering in Keith County. How do we support quality? How do we support workforce? How do we support education and child development? Because all of these things are connected. So one of the things that we know about Keith County is that you guys are very persistent. You're persistent in your approach and your efforts, and you think about it from multiple angles. What are your hopes for your early childhood landscape?
oh goodness. I would just love to see, well, let me back up. We have yeah, you're looking
Ken, we
at
got
your
12
watch.
minutes. we got to stay on
Don't think
schedule.
about this too long. Okay, we have a casino and racetrack coming into Ogallala that will probably open in about 2 years. Maybe it'll take a little longer. With maybe 100 new employees, maybe more than that, and that is going to change housing and childcare, and we don't know in what way. My hope for childcare in Keith County is that we can cooperate with the casino operators to build a daycare center with them for the benefit of the community.
Just that collaboration, which we've talked about across the board. And what about you, Mary? What are your hopes?
Sure. I'd like to take it back a little bit. What I hope for is that I never have to read on Facebook again a desperate parent saying, I need childcare. Can anyone help me out? So I said to my daughter, I'm like, why would somebody do that? Who are they letting raise or take care of their children? And she said, somebody who needs to go to work. I understand that, but so my vision for what I'd like to see in Keith County is that we are all educated, just back down to the basics of why it's important, early childhood development, why parents, grandparents, business owners, everybody, city, county officials need to know the importance of who is taking care of our children and what they are learning and the brain development. You know, why it's important, quality, and why it's so important. So I'm going to take it back to a step of, yes, I want to see our capacity increase, but what I really want is for everybody to be on the same page of why it's so important.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as you can see across the board, there are a number of different ways communities and organizations are addressing challenges within early childcare and education. So in closing, one of the things that I would like to do is, first of all, thank all of you for sharing your stories and your perspective. And my one last request would be that you all share a piece of advice that you could share with community members, or again, a specific tactic or approach that you've seen happen with everybody in the room as we close. And it's lightning round, Ken, because we have...
What?
You think about your advice. We really are best friends.
Where are you starting?
You want to start?
With me?
Yeah.
Well, sure. I think the thing is to build all the partnerships that you can. The collaboration is super important.
That's great advice. Thank you.
I'm going to go along with that. Invite, invite, invite. Invite everybody to the table.
So mine is know why you do what you do. Share your passion. Remember you are here for the children and the impact your facility will have on each child in your care. Be part of their success story.
Did she give you a heads up on this? You had it written out.
Ken, we had a script. That was fantastic.
That's how
Thank
I
you.
live my life. This is my passion.
Yeah.
So.
See?
I'm going to go off script because my previous answers are exactly like theirs, but I would say from a business sense, listen to your employees and let their needs inform what your decisions are from a benefit standpoint for employers.
Amazing. Thank you.
And I'm going to end with, I love the word, what do you hope for your communities? So that children and families thrive. That's my greatest hope. But in that, as a collaboration, or all of us in general, building really good, solid relationships where trust is built and people really know that you're reliable. Also looking at everything through a preventative lens so that we don't get into those crisis periods. And then just remembering the importance of looking at sustainability. Where are you going from here?
Thank you for all of that advice. I think the one thing that, and this is kind of going off script also, is knowing the why and then engaging with others. And I think that that's something that's carried throughout, even from the keynote discussion this morning, that we cannot do this alone. So thank you. Thank you for this inspiring panel conversation. I encourage everybody to consider these examples to continue the great work in your community. Thank you.